She had been looking forward to this night for weeks. The thought of meeting someone new, someone who might understand her and share her interests, had kept her awake with excitement and anticipation. She had spent the evening before carefully planning what to wear, laying out clothes and accessories on her bed, changing multiple times, and finally deciding on a simple yet elegant dress that made her feel confident. She checked herself in the mirror one last time, straightening her hair and brushing a few strands into place. A small smile formed on her lips as she imagined how the night could unfold. The restaurant was a cozy, quiet place she had never visited before, chosen by her friend who had set up the blind date. As she walked through the streets, the crisp evening air filled her lungs and she tried to calm the fluttering in her stomach. She told herself that it was normal to feel nervous, that everyone felt this way before meeting someone new. With each step, she rehearsed polite greetings and casual conversation topics in her mind. She tried to imagine what her date would be like, hoping he would be kind, interesting, and attentive. She pictured herself laughing at his jokes and enjoying the evening without worry. When she arrived at the restaurant, she spotted him immediately. He was seated at a small table near the window, his phone in hand, scrolling through it with an intensity that made her pause. She walked over with a hopeful smile and greeted him warmly. He looked up briefly, gave a small nod, and returned to his phone. She felt a twinge of disappointment but tried to ignore it. Perhaps he was just finishing something important, she told herself. She pulled out her chair and sat down, setting her bag beside her and folding her hands on the table. She started the conversation with a light question about the city and its events, hoping to find some common ground. His responses were short and indifferent. He nodded or mumbled words that barely formed a sentence. She laughed politely at a joke he made, but there was no sparkle in his eyes, no real connection. She tried asking about his hobbies, his favorite books and movies, but his answers were minimal. She felt invisible, as if her presence did not matter. The excitement she had felt before entering the restaurant was slowly fading, replaced by a heavy weight of disappointment and discomfort. Despite his inattentiveness, she attempted to keep the conversation alive. She shared stories from her work, small adventures she had experienced recently, and funny incidents from her daily life. She noticed that he hardly looked at her while she spoke. His attention seemed absorbed by his phone, the screen reflecting in his glasses as he scrolled endlessly. She began to feel frustrated but tried to maintain her composure, reminding herself that it was just one evening, and not to let it ruin her mood completely. The waiter came by and asked if she wanted to order anything. She smiled politely and decided to order a cup of tea, something simple as she was unsure of the mood. She hoped that having a moment to herself might help her feel better. The waiter left and she sighed quietly, feeling the tension in her shoulders. She realized she had been sitting there, trying to engage someone who clearly did not care, and it hurt more than she expected. Her mind began to race with questions about what she could have done differently, why he was so uninterested, and whether she had misjudged herself or the situation. As she sat there, she looked around the restaurant. Couples were laughing and chatting at nearby tables, the warmth of their connection highlighted by the soft lighting. She felt a pang of longing for that kind of interaction, for someone to truly see her and respond with interest. She tried to shake off the sadness, reminding herself that this was only one person, one evening, and it did not define her. Still, the feeling of being ignored was hard to swallow. She pushed her chair slightly back and ran her fingers along the edge of the table, trying to ground herself and stay calm. After a while, she excused herself and stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The night was cool, the kind of night that made her feel awake and alert, but it also carried a quiet melancholy. She walked down the sidewalk slowly, taking in the sounds of distant traffic, the occasional laughter from nearby restaurants, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. Her mind replayed the evening, each moment magnified in her memory, making her feel even more disappointed. She found a bench outside the restaurant and sat down, letting out a long sigh. She stared at the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement, feeling small and overlooked. She wondered why people could be so indifferent, why someone would come to a date without any intention of giving their full attention. She felt a mix of frustration and sadness, emotions she tried hard to keep hidden from the world. She had hoped for a connection, a spark of conversation and shared laughter, and instead, she was met with emptiness. While she sat there, lost in her thoughts, A stranger approached and noticed her sitting alone with a distant expression. He was not imposing or overly bold, but there was a gentle curiosity in his eyes. He asked if he could sit on the bench beside her. She hesitated for a moment but nodded, grateful for a small distraction from her own thoughts. The stranger's presence was calm, not overwhelming, and it felt like a safe space to breathe. He started a conversation in a casual, friendly manner, commenting on the weather and the quiet of the evening streets. She responded hesitantly at first, unsure if she was ready to engage, but something in his tone made her feel at ease. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions without prying too much into her personal life. She found herself relaxing for the first time that evening, the tension in her shoulders easing as she responded with more openness. They began talking about small, everyday things, favorite coffee shops, simple joys of the city, the little adventures that make life interesting. The conversation was effortless, a natural back and forth that she had not experienced all evening. She laughed at a funny story he shared about his own awkward date experiences, feeling a lightness return to her chest. The stranger's words were kind, his attention sincere, and for the first time since arriving at the restaurant, she felt truly seen. As the conversation continued, she shared a few stories from her life, moments she had never told a stranger before. He responded with empathy, nodding and sharing similar experiences, creating a feeling of connection that had been absent all evening. She realized how much she had been craving simple human interaction, someone to listen without judgment, someone to offer warmth and understanding. The stranger's presence was a stark contrast to the coldness of her date, and it made her feel grateful for this unexpected encounter. Time seemed to pass quickly, the minutes stretching into hours without her noticing. The stranger encouraged her gently, making light-hearted comments that made her smile and feel valued. She started to reflect on the night differently, seeing that not every interaction needed to be perfect or pre-planned to have meaning. This brief connection reminded her that kindness and attentiveness could appear in the most unexpected ways, sometimes when least expected. Eventually, she glanced at her watch and realized how late it had become. She thanked the stranger for keeping her company and sharing his words, feeling a genuine warmth in her heart. The encounter had turned her evening around, shifting her focus from disappointment to gratitude, from feeling ignored to feeling appreciated. She smiled to herself, thinking about how small gestures could have a big impact on someone's mood and perspective. Walking back into the restaurant to collect her things, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. She decided to politely end the date early, knowing that she deserved someone who would value her presence. The brief but meaningful conversation with the stranger had reminded her of her worth and the importance of genuine human connection. She approached her date, explained that she did not feel a connection, and excused herself. He looked up briefly, indifferent, and she walked away without looking back, feeling lighter than she had in hours. As she stepped back onto the street, the cool air felt refreshing and she took a deep breath, appreciating the clarity the evening had unexpectedly brought. She reflected on the stranger's words, the kindness and attention he had shown, and how it had shifted her perspective. She realized that even in moments of disappointment, there was the potential for unexpected joy, for encounters that could leave a lasting positive impression. The night, which had started with hurt and invisibility, ended with a sense of self-respect, empowerment, and a reminder that meaningful connections often come when we least expect them. After leaving the restaurant, she felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. Relief because she had finally walked away from a situation that made her feel invisible, and curiosity because of the stranger she had met outside. His kind words had stirred something inside her, a feeling that maybe not all evenings ended in disappointment. The night air was cool against her skin, and she walked slowly along the quiet streets, her mind replaying snippets of the conversation. His gentle encouragement, his easy smile, and the way he seemed to truly listen kept coming back to her. She found herself near a small cafe that stayed open late. The warm glow from its windows and the faint smell of coffee and pastries invited her in. Without thinking much, she pushed the door open and stepped inside, letting the soft hum of conversation and the rich aroma wash over her. She picked a corner seat and sat down, her thoughts still lingering on the stranger. It was strange how quickly someone she had just met could leave such a lasting impression. She wondered if it was really possible to feel connected to someone in just a few moments. As she sipped her tea, she noticed the cafe wasn't crowded. A few people were scattered across tables, quietly talking or working on their laptops. The calm atmosphere helped her relax further. She reflected on her earlier date, realizing that she had been so focused on seeking validation from someone else that she had forgotten how to value herself in the moment. The stranger's words had reminded her that her worth was not dependent on anyone else's attention. This insight made her feel lighter, more confident and ready to embrace the night differently. Meanwhile, the stranger, whose name she had learned was Daniel, had also left the scene feeling intrigued. He wasn't expecting to meet someone in such a brief, unplanned way, yet he couldn't shake the thought of the woman sitting alone outside the restaurant. He had been drawn to her quiet resilience, her eyes reflecting both disappointment and hope. Something about the way she had opened up to him, even for a few minutes, had made an impression he hadn't anticipated. The next day, she woke up thinking about the encounter. The memory of the night outside the restaurant lingered, like a small light in an otherwise ordinary day. She went about her morning routine, making coffee, checking messages, and preparing for work, but a sense of anticipation lingered. The stranger's words kept replaying in her mind, reminding her that simple kindness and genuine attention could have a profound impact on someone's mood. It was a realization that made her appreciate the small, meaningful interactions that often went unnoticed in daily life. During lunch break, she found herself walking to a nearby park, the same one where she sometimes went to clear her mind. She sat on a bench under a tree, watching the leaves sway gently in the breeze. She reflected on her emotions from the previous night, recognizing a subtle shift in her mindset. She realized that while her blind date had been disappointing, it had also opened the door to an unexpected encounter that brought her comfort and reassurance. She smiled softly, acknowledging that not all experiences, even negative ones, were wasted. Later that afternoon, she received a message from Daniel. He had found her contact through a small note she had left on the bench, something simple like a name and a number, and he had felt compelled to reach out. His message was polite, casual, and warm. He asked if she would like to meet for coffee sometime, expressing that he enjoyed their brief conversation and would like to continue it. She felt a flutter of excitement, realizing that their connection could continue in a more intentional way. She quickly responded, accepting the invitation, and her heart lifted with anticipation. When they met for coffee a few days later, the conversation picked up as if no time had passed. They talked about their favorite books, shared funny experiences from work, and discussed small dreams for the future. She found herself opening up naturally, laughing more freely and feeling an ease she hadn't experienced in a long time. Daniel listened intently, responding with empathy and genuine curiosity. The simplicity of the moment made her realize how rare it was to meet someone who could engage so fully without distractions or pretenses. As the afternoon passed, they decided to take a short walk in a nearby garden. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting gentle patterns on the ground. They spoke about life, the ups and downs, the importance of finding moments of joy even in ordinary days. She felt understood, not judged, and appreciated for simply being herself. The experience was refreshing, a reminder that connection did not always have to be complicated to be meaningful. During their walk, Daniel shared a story about a small act of kindness he had experienced recently. A stranger had helped him when he was lost, offering directions and a friendly smile. He explained how that simple gesture had lifted his spirits, making him realize the impact one person could have on another's day. She nodded, feeling a resonance with the story. She thought about her own experiences and how a brief encounter with someone attentive and kind could leave a lasting impression. The realization made her more aware of the ways she could contribute small acts of kindness in her own life. As the day turned into evening, they returned to the cafe for a final cup of coffee. They sat quietly for a moment, enjoying the ambient sounds and the gentle hum of conversation around them. She noticed the subtle shift in her perspective. She no longer felt the sting of her failed blind date. Instead, she felt gratitude for the unexpected moments that had followed. She realized that sometimes disappointment could lead to surprising opportunities, and that genuine connections often appeared when least expected. Over the next few weeks, they continued to meet occasionally, each encounter deepening their understanding and respect for one another. They explored local markets, shared meals, and had long conversations about dreams and life lessons. With each meeting, she felt a growing sense of trust and comfort, a feeling of being seen and appreciated for who she truly was. The stranger, Daniel, had become a source of positivity in her life, a reminder that even after a disappointing start, meaningful relationships could bloom unexpectedly. During this time, she also reflected on her previous blind date with a sense of clarity. She recognized that the experience, while painful at the moment, had led her to a better understanding of her own needs and values. She realized that it was important to be around people who genuinely cared, who could offer attention, empathy, and respect. The encounter with Daniel had reinforced her belief in the power of human connection and the importance of remaining open to new experiences, even after setbacks. One afternoon, they attended a small art exhibit together. The room was filled with paintings and sculptures, each piece telling a story. They wandered slowly, discussing the emotions each artwork evoked. She found herself sharing her interpretations freely, and Daniel listened with genuine interest. The experience felt intimate and meaningful, not because of the setting itself, but because of the shared attention and mutual respect they had cultivated. She appreciated how their connection went beyond surface-level conversation, reaching into genuine understanding and appreciation for one another's perspectives. Through these experiences, she began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt more confident in social situations, more willing to engage with others authentically. She smiled more often, laughed more freely, and approached new interactions with curiosity rather than apprehension. The memory of being ignored at her blind date no longer carried the weight it once had. Instead, it served as a reminder of how unexpected kindness could transform a difficult moment into an opportunity for growth and connection. As their friendship developed, they often reminisced about that night outside the restaurant. She told him how much his words had meant, how they had turned her evening around and helped her regain perspective. He listened with humility, expressing that he had simply noticed her and wanted to offer genuine attention, not realizing the depth of impact it would have. They laughed together at the improbability of that brief encounter, acknowledging how small actions could sometimes lead to profound consequences. One evening, as they sat in a quiet park, she reflected on the journey of the past few weeks. From a disappointing start to the beginning of a meaningful connection, the experience had taught her resilience, the importance of self-worth, and the value of authentic interactions. She realized that life often presented moments of challenge not to punish, but to guide toward unexpected opportunities. She felt a deep appreciation for the stranger who had shown her kindness when she needed it most, a simple gesture that had changed the course of her evening and, ultimately, her perspective on human connection. In the quiet of that park, she understood a fundamental truth, that meaningful connections often emerged in the most unexpected ways, and that one person's genuine attention could have a lasting impact. She smiled, feeling grateful for the night she had once feared would be a disappointment. It had become the beginning of a journey that reminded her to remain open to kindness, to value herself, and to recognize the profound difference that small, genuine gestures could make in her life and the lives of others. The following week brought a fresh sense of excitement and curiosity. She felt lighter, almost as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her previous disappointment had transformed into a learning experience, and the encounter with Daniel had opened a door to a new chapter in her life. She walked through the familiar streets with a sense of anticipation, her eyes noticing details she had never paid attention to before. The way sunlight reflected on a shop window, the scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, and the laughter of children playing across the street. It was as if the city itself was welcoming her renewed perspective. Daniel had suggested they meet at a small, quiet cafe tucked away on a side street. She arrived early, feeling both nervous and excited, not knowing exactly what the meeting would hold. As she stepped inside, she spotted him already seated at a corner table, smiling warmly. That smile seemed to lift the remaining tension in her chest, and she greeted him with a genuine laugh. From that moment, the conversation flowed naturally. They spoke about work, shared small anecdotes about their daily lives, and laughed at each other's stories. The ease of interaction was refreshing, a stark contrast to the stifling discomfort of her blind date. She felt comfortable expressing herself without fear of being ignored or judged. Daniel listened attentively, offering thoughtful responses and gentle encouragement. Their conversation wandered from trivial matters to deeper reflections about life, family, and personal growth. Each word exchanged built a sense of trust and familiarity, creating a bond that felt both authentic and rare. She marveled at how someone she had just met could make her feel understood and valued in ways her blind date never had. After finishing their coffee, they decided to take a walk along a nearby path lined with trees. The cool breeze and the soft rustle of leaves provided a perfect backdrop for further conversation. Daniel shared more stories about his experiences, including moments when unexpected kindness had made a significant impact on his day. She listened intently, inspired by his perspective on life and the way he valued small, meaningful interactions. In turn, she opened up about her own experiences, recounting memories that brought both laughter and quiet reflection. The walk became more than a simple stroll. It was an exchange of thoughts, emotions, and subtle insights that deepened their connection. As the afternoon passed, she realized how much she had changed since her disappointing blind date. The encounter with Daniel had reminded her that genuine attention and empathy could completely shift one's mood and perspective. She felt more confident, more willing to engage openly with others, and more appreciative of the small gestures that often went unnoticed. She began to see her own value clearly, understanding that her worth was not tied to someone else's attention, but to the way she embraced her own experiences and emotions. They continued meeting over the next few weeks, each interaction strengthening the bond between them. Whether it was a quiet conversation over coffee, a walk through the park, or a shared meal at a local eatery, each moment brought new understanding and respect. She began to notice subtle changes in herself. She smiled more freely, laughed more easily, and approached new situations with a sense of curiosity rather than apprehension. The experience with Daniel had not only provided companionship, but also encouraged personal growth and self-reflection. During one of their meetings, they visited a small art exhibit. The room was filled with paintings and sculptures, each piece telling its own story. As they moved slowly through the exhibit, she shared her interpretations of the artwork, discussing the emotions and thoughts they evoked. Daniel listened attentively, offering his perspective and insights. The conversation flowed effortlessly, creating a shared experience that felt intimate and meaningful. She realized that connection was not only about conversation, but also about shared presence and understanding, the subtle ways in which people acknowledge and value each other. In another meeting, they spent an afternoon exploring a local market. The vibrant colors of fruits, vegetables, and handmade crafts created a lively atmosphere. They sampled small bites, chatted with vendors, and laughed at the unexpected quirks of the marketplace. She noticed how easily she could be herself around Daniel, without the need for pretense or careful impression management. The joy of simple experiences, amplified by the company of someone attentive and kind, became a recurring theme in her life. Through these experiences, she began to reflect more deeply on her own patterns of thought and behavior. She realized that her initial disappointment on the blind date had been intensified by her own expectations and fears of rejection. The encounter with Daniel had helped her reframe her perspective, showing her that not every negative experience defined her worth or the potential for meaningful connection. She understood that life often presented challenges and setbacks, not as obstacles but as opportunities for growth and self-awareness. One evening, they found themselves sitting by a small fountain in the park, the gentle sound of water creating a calming rhythm. The conversation turned to personal goals and aspirations. She spoke about dreams she had long set aside, ambitions she had hesitated to pursue. Daniel listened with genuine interest, offering encouragement without pressure. His presence reminded her that support and validation could be given freely and without expectation. She felt a renewed sense of motivation, realizing that small gestures of encouragement could inspire significant personal progress. They often revisited that night outside the restaurant, laughing at the unexpected turn of events. She shared how much his words had mattered, how they had shifted her perspective when she felt most invisible. Daniel, in turn, admitted he had not anticipated the depth of impact a simple conversation could have. They both recognized the power of attentiveness, kindness, and genuine connection, understanding that even brief moments could shape emotions and outlooks in lasting ways. Through these interactions, she also became more aware of her own capacity for kindness and empathy. She noticed how small, deliberate actions, a smile, a thoughtful question, or a moment of attentive listening, could create meaningful change in someone else's experience. She began to practice these small gestures in her daily life, noticing how they improved not only her interactions but also her own sense of fulfillment and well-being. The lessons from her encounter with Daniel extended beyond their relationship, influencing her broader approach to people and situations. One afternoon, they decided to spend the day exploring a nearby nature reserve. The walk was filled with laughter, quiet contemplation, and shared observations about the beauty of the surroundings. She felt fully present, appreciating the simplicity of the experience and the comfort of genuine companionship. As they reached a small hill overlooking the valley, they paused to take in the view. The vast expanse of greenery and the gentle sound of birds reminded her of the smallness of individual worries in the grand scheme of life. The experience was grounding, reinforcing her sense of perspective and gratitude. Throughout this period, she reflected frequently on the contrast between her initial blind date and the connection she had developed with Daniel. The difference was not only in attentiveness but also in intention and presence. She recognized the value of being fully present with others, of offering and receiving attention without distraction or judgment. This realization reshaped how she approached social interactions, making her more discerning, patient, and appreciative of authentic connections. The weeks continued to bring new experiences and shared moments. They attended small concerts, visited local bookstores, and explored quiet corners of the city. Each activity, no matter how ordinary, was enriched by the presence of someone who genuinely cared and listened. She noticed the gradual evolution of her own confidence and self-assurance, a direct result of being treated with respect, kindness, and attentiveness. The emotional growth she experienced was profound, reminding her of the significance of human connection in shaping both perception and self-esteem. In quiet moments of reflection, she often thought about how quickly an evening that began with disappointment had transformed into a journey of connection and personal insight. She realized that life's unexpected turns could bring unforeseen rewards, that moments of kindness, attentiveness, and genuine interest could alter the course of one's emotional landscape. The encounter with Daniel had provided more than companionship. It had offered lessons in empathy, self-worth, and the subtle power of human interaction. By the end of the third part of this journey, she felt a strong sense of clarity and empowerment. The negative feelings from her blind date had faded, replaced by gratitude for the lessons learned and the connection nurtured with Daniel. She understood that meaningful interactions often arose from patience, openness, and the willingness to engage with others authentically. The story of that disappointing evening had transformed into a narrative of growth, insight, and the discovery of the profound impact that one person's kindness and attention could have on another. The days turned into weeks, and her connection with Daniel continued to grow. Each meeting added another layer to their friendship, deepening their understanding and respect for one another. They spent time exploring hidden corners of the city, discovering small parks, quiet streets, and little cafes that few people knew about. Every outing was an adventure in its own way, filled with laughter, thoughtful conversation, and moments of shared reflection. She began to notice how much her own perspective on life was shifting, becoming more patient, more appreciative of small joys, and more aware of the value of meaningful connections. One afternoon, they decided to visit a small local museum. The building was unassuming from the outside, but inside it held a collection of art and history that sparked curiosity and wonder. They walked slowly through the exhibits, pausing to discuss details that caught their attention. She found herself speaking more freely than she ever had before, expressing opinions and interpretations without fear of judgment. Daniel listened intently, often offering insights that complemented her thoughts. She realized how rare it was to feel truly understood, and how much it mattered in building a sense of trust and companionship. After the museum, they wandered through the streets, stopping at a small bakery to pick up some pastries. As they sat on a bench nearby, sharing bites and chatting about life, she felt a profound sense of comfort. The initial awkwardness of her blind date had faded completely, replaced by the warmth of a connection based on mutual respect and genuine interest. She began to see how small gestures, a smile, a listening ear, a simple question, could transform ordinary moments into something meaningful. During one of their conversations, Daniel shared a story about a time he had felt ignored and undervalued. He spoke about how a small act of kindness from a stranger had shifted his mood and made him feel seen. Listening to him, she realized how universal the need for acknowledgement and attention was, and how powerful it could be when offered sincerely. It reminded her of her own experience outside the restaurant, and she felt gratitude for that brief encounter that had changed the course of her evening and eventually led to the meaningful connection she now enjoyed. They began to share more personal experiences and reflections. She talked about moments in her past when she had felt overlooked or dismissed, and Daniel responded with empathy, sharing how he had navigated similar feelings. Their conversations were honest and open, creating a sense of vulnerability that strengthened their bond. She noticed how liberating it felt to speak without fear of being ignored or dismissed, and how refreshing it was to listen and be listened to in return. The exchange of thoughts and emotions became a source of joy and growth for both of them. One weekend, they decided to spend a day at a nearby lake. The weather was perfect, with a gentle breeze and sunlight reflecting off the water. They rented a small rowboat and drifted quietly, talking about everything from dreams and ambitions to the simple pleasures of daily life. She felt a sense of peace and contentment she had not experienced in a long time. The gentle rhythm of the water, the warmth of the sun, and the presence of someone who truly listened created an atmosphere of calm and connection. She realized how much she valued these moments of shared presence and attention. As their friendship developed, they also began to talk about challenges and struggles. Daniel spoke about times when he had felt uncertain or insecure, and she shared her own experiences of self-doubt. These conversations were never heavy or burdensome. Instead, they were supportive and affirming. They encouraged each other to reflect, grow, and approach life with resilience. She noticed how her confidence had increased, how she felt more comfortable in her own skin, and how she could now navigate social situations with greater ease and self-assurance. One evening, as they sat in a quiet park watching the sunset, she reflected on how much had changed since the night of her blind date. What had started as disappointment had transformed into a journey of self-discovery, growth, and meaningful connection. She realized that every negative experience carried the potential for positive outcomes if approached with openness and reflection. The brief encounter with Daniel outside the restaurant had set off a chain of events that led to genuine companionship, laughter, and mutual support. It reminded her of the importance of being present, attentive, and kind both to herself and to others. They continued to explore new experiences together. They attended local music events, visited small gardens, and even took short day trips to nearby towns. Each adventure was filled with moments of shared curiosity, joy, and connection. She noticed how much her perspective on life had shifted. She was more observant, more appreciative of small pleasures, and more attuned to the value of authentic interactions. The lessons she had learned from her initial disappointment were now embedded in her approach to life, guiding her to seek meaningful engagement rather than superficial approval. Through their time together, she also began to recognize the impact of her own actions on others. She realized that the kindness and attention she offered could positively influence someone's day. Just as Daniel's attentiveness had uplifted hers, she started to practice small gestures of care and empathy in her daily interactions. Noticing how these actions strengthened relationships and fostered a sense of community, the experience reinforced her understanding of the interconnectedness of human experience and the power of compassion. One afternoon, they visited a small library tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The shelves were filled with books of all kinds, and the smell of old paper and polished wood created a sense of calm and curiosity. They browsed together, sharing recommendations and discussing favorite authors. She felt a sense of intellectual stimulation combined with emotional comfort, appreciating how their conversations could range from light-hearted banter to deep reflections without losing authenticity. The shared love of learning and exploration became another pillar of their growing connection. As weeks passed, they often reflected on the initial encounter that had brought them together. They laughed at the improbability of meeting under such circumstances and marveled at how a simple act of noticing someone could lead to lasting friendship. She felt grateful not only for the companionship, but also for the lessons learned about self-worth, attention, and the importance of empathy. These reflections strengthened her appreciation for the journey she had experienced, turning what could have been a story of disappointment into a story of growth and meaningful human connection. One evening, as they walked through the city streets lit by soft streetlights, she realized how much her approach to life had changed. She was more patient, more observant, and more confident in engaging with others authentically. The experience with Daniel had taught her that meaningful connections were built on attentiveness, empathy, and genuine interest, and that even brief encounters could leave lasting impressions. She felt empowered, understanding that her value was not determined by anyone else's attention but by her own perception and self-respect. Through these experiences, she also learned the importance of gratitude. She reflected on the stranger who had first spoken to her outside the restaurant, and how his simple words had shifted her evening from disappointment to possibility. That encounter had been a catalyst for her journey of connection, growth, and self-discovery. She realized that life often offered unexpected opportunities for joy and learning, even in moments that initially seemed discouraging. Embracing these moments allowed her to approach life with curiosity, openness, and appreciation. By the end of this part of her journey, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The initial experience of being ignored at her blind date no longer held power over her emotions. Instead, it had become a reference point for personal growth, empathy, and the importance of genuine connection. She understood that every encounter, positive or negative, could offer lessons if approached with reflection and openness. The story of her evening had transformed into a narrative of resilience, learning, and the profound impact that small acts of kindness and attention could have on someone's life. As the weeks passed, she realized that her life had subtly changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The initial disappointment of her blind date, which had once felt like a personal failure, now seemed like a distant memory. The journey that followed, beginning with a chance encounter with Daniel, had introduced her to the power of genuine human connection. Each moment she spent with him, whether in laughter, conversation, or shared silence, had left a mark on her understanding of herself and the world around her. One weekend, they decided to take a short trip to a small coastal town not far from the city. The drive was filled with easy conversation, playful banter, and occasional silence that felt comfortable rather than awkward. When they arrived, the sound of waves crashing against the shore and the salty breeze welcomed them. They walked along the beach, collecting shells and observing the small crabs scuttling across the sand. The simplicity of the day highlighted how meaningful experiences did not require grand gestures or elaborate plans. It was the presence of someone attentive and kind that made ordinary moments extraordinary. While sitting on a driftwood log watching the sunset, she reflected on the transformation she had undergone over the past weeks. She remembered the hopelessness she had felt at her blind date, the sting of being ignored, and the uncertainty about her own worth. Those feelings had been intense, yet they had been the catalyst for meeting someone who valued her perspective and presence. Daniel had not only provided companionship, but had also reminded her of her ability to recognize and appreciate genuine human connection. On the way back, they stopped at a small roadside cafe for a quick meal. The dim lighting and cozy atmosphere created a sense of intimacy. They talked about future plans, dreams, and the lessons they had learned from past experiences. She realized how much she had grown, understanding the importance of patience, self-respect, and openness to new encounters. Daniel shared stories of similar experiences, reinforcing the idea that life often unfolded in unpredictable but meaningful ways. She felt grateful for the journey they were on, for the bond that had developed, and for the realization that one small act of kindness could spark a series of positive changes. Back in the city, their routine continued with shared visits to parks, museums, and quiet cafes. They spent hours walking along familiar streets, noticing details they had previously overlooked. She found joy in the ordinary moments, watching a street musician perform, observing children play in a fountain, or stopping to enjoy a freshly baked pastry. These moments, enriched by shared attention and genuine conversation, became a source of happiness and reflection. She began to recognize the importance of mindfulness and being present, appreciating the value of small experiences in shaping life's narrative. During one particularly quiet afternoon, they found themselves sitting on a bench near a fountain in the heart of the city. The gentle sound of water created a soothing rhythm, and the light filtering through nearby trees cast delicate patterns on the ground. They spoke about the challenges they had faced in the past, the moments of self-doubt, and the ways they had learned to navigate uncertainty. She realized that her previous disappointment, while painful at the time, had been instrumental in shaping her perspective. It had taught her resilience, the importance of self-worth, and the value of recognizing genuine gestures of kindness when they appeared. She also reflected on how much she had learned about herself. The experience had taught her to trust her instincts, to be discerning about who she allowed into her life, and to recognize the subtle signs of genuine interest and empathy. She noticed changes in her own behavior. She was more attentive, more compassionate, and more willing to engage with others authentically. The transformation was not sudden but gradual, shaped by repeated experiences of meaningful interaction and mutual respect. She felt empowered, understanding that personal growth often stemmed from reflection and the willingness to embrace both positive and negative experiences. One evening, as they walked through the city streets illuminated by soft streetlights, she thought about how unlikely it was that her journey had started with a disappointing blind date. The memory of that evening no longer carried a sting of rejection, but instead reminded her of the unexpected opportunities that life could present. She realized that sometimes setbacks were necessary to redirect focus, open new paths, and foster meaningful connections that might not have appeared otherwise. The encounter with Daniel had been a turning point, one that reinforced the importance of attentiveness, empathy, and authenticity in human relationships. They often revisited the story of the night outside the restaurant, laughing at the unpredictability of life. She shared how his words had turned her evening around, how a few genuine sentences had shifted her mood from disappointment to hope. Daniel expressed that he had not anticipated the depth of impact a simple conversation could have, reinforcing the lesson that small gestures of attention could create profound changes. Their shared reflections strengthened their bond, creating a mutual appreciation for the nuances of human connection. Over time, she began to notice how her own approach to life had evolved. She was more present in her interactions, more patient with others, and more willing to appreciate the small, meaningful gestures that often went unnoticed. The experience had taught her that human connection was built on attentiveness, empathy, and respect, rather than superficial appearances or forced conversations. She felt a growing sense of confidence and inner peace, recognizing that her value was not determined by external validation, but by her own understanding and self-respect. During a quiet afternoon at a local park, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. She realized that life often presented moments of disappointment, not to punish but to guide toward meaningful opportunities. The night she had been ignored had led to a connection that enriched her life in unexpected ways. She understood that every experience, even those that initially seemed negative, carried the potential for growth and insight if approached with openness and reflection. This perspective allowed her to navigate challenges with resilience and optimism. One weekend, they attended a small local music festival. The vibrant atmosphere, the energy of the crowd, and the shared enjoyment of music created a joyful experience. She noticed how easily she could be herself around Daniel, laughing freely, engaging in conversation, and feeling a sense of belonging. The festival became another example of how meaningful connections could transform ordinary experiences into lasting memories. She appreciated the simplicity of enjoying life together without the need for elaborate plans or external validation. As weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened. They explored new neighborhoods, visited small galleries, and spent quiet evenings discussing books and ideas. She noticed the subtle ways in which their interactions influenced her personal growth, helping her become more attentive, empathetic, and confident. She realized that genuine connections required effort, patience, and authenticity, and that the rewards of such connections extended far beyond superficial enjoyment. The experience reinforced the idea that meaningful relationships were built on mutual respect and understanding. Reflecting on her journey, she understood how far she had come since the night of her blind date. What had started as a moment of disappointment had transformed into a profound lesson in human connection, self-worth, and the impact of small gestures. She felt gratitude for Daniel's attentiveness, the kindness of strangers, and the subtle ways life presented opportunities for growth. She understood that her value was inherent, not dependent on the attention of others, and that meaningful relationships were nurtured through authenticity, empathy, and respect. In the quiet moments of reflection, She often thought about the trajectory of her experiences. She recognized that life's unexpected turns could lead to profound discoveries, that setbacks could guide toward growth, and that genuine human connection was one of the most powerful sources of joy and fulfillment. She felt empowered by these insights, carrying them into future interactions with an open heart and a discerning mind. The story of her blind date had evolved into a narrative of resilience, insight, and the transformative power of simple, meaningful gestures. By the end of this chapter, she felt a sense of completion and clarity. The initial feelings of disappointment were replaced by gratitude, confidence, and understanding. She had learned to navigate life with a renewed sense of perspective, recognizing the value of attentiveness, empathy, and authenticity. The encounter with Daniel had been a turning point, demonstrating how one person's genuine attention could change the course of an evening and, ultimately, influence the trajectory of personal growth and meaningful connection. She smiled, appreciating the journey, and looked forward to the future with hope, curiosity, and a deep understanding of the power of human kindness.